All right, I think we're good. Welcome back to another one of these things where we just kind of talk about whatever. It's starting to sound like an intro. Like I could probably start playing some music or something with that. That's just pretty consistent. Hey, there we're going. Welcome back to another one of these things where we just talk about something, and I just throw some word in there. A little break. I could probably like start with a little. I don't know. I wrote music way before like I did a bunch of these other things, so I suppose I could just whip together something that I can throw together here. Whip together something that I can throw together here. That was probably an arbitrarily long sentence, but not why we're here. Well, maybe it is why we're here. I'm basically just making an arbitrarily long sentence at you. Anywho, happy Monday. I hope your weekend was wonderful, or as wonderful as it can be. Mine was filled with a lot of writing, which maybe I'll talk about at some point. I kind of liked the post that I was putting together for this weekend. It ended up going back to a little bit of the whole me talking about how one of my photos got removed from a few groups, a few nature photo groups on Flickr for having a road in it, and it made me start thinking about. You know what? Let's actually just talk a little about that, I suppose. A picture got removed from a couple of groups because it had a road in it, and that was okay for me. Like I was definitely a little bitter about it, like when it first happened, because I was just like, man, but it's like a decent picture. Like it's still quite natural. It's just there happens to be a tree next to a road. Nothing on the road, just that pavement. And when I went to go look, I was like, okay, it looks like my groups are just missing from a bunch of my photos. I went back like to a bunch of my old ones, and I'm like, oh, okay, so I only have one nature group, or one primary nature group that all these photos are on. And I was like, okay, maybe the groups are just gone. And I went to go look them up, and I'm like, okay, they're still here. And I went to go check their profile pages, and I was like, okay, so they have an off topics like photos section, so I'm like, let's take a look at that. And it just says, don't show any evidence of man being humans in your photos, and that extends to roads, fences, stairs, things like that. Anything that has to do with humans, if it's in the picture, it's not all natural. And I'm like, okay, cool, mystery solved. At least it wasn't like me being like, or the group just being gone, or me messing something up. It's just one of my photos didn't mesh with their rule set, which is fine. Like any social media community has the right to create rules and enforce those rules how they want, so not a big deal. But thinking in the grander scheme of things, this is where it's like I'm kind of glad like little experiences like that happen, because it gets you thinking about seemingly trivial things, but they can have like a greater impact. So last year I had written, I guess if I'm pointing to the left, that usually means back. I'm pointing to the right because, you know, mirrored things. Maybe you don't, but oh well, we're still getting used to this thing. But last year, I had written a post called Unpristine Nature, which I had been reading a book. I don't know if I have it here next to me. I do actually have it here. The one that I was reading last year. I got about halfway through it, and I stopped reading, and I should go back and finish it. Oh, let me get that. And hopefully not knock down a bunch of other things. This one here. Rambunctious Garden. Whoops. Let's do that, and hopefully it does something there. Saving nature in a post-wild world. So this book goes over a few ways that humans sort of deal with nature in a modern world. So what happens in a world where all the environment, all the ecosystems in the world have been in some way touched by humanity? When we think in terms of conservation, we usually think in terms of saving what's already there, what hasn't been what hasn't been manipulated by people. And the harsh truth of that sentimentality, or that sentiment, not sentimentality, that sentiment, is that while we may not have physically touched the entire planet at this point, like humans themselves, we have influenced the entire planet, whether we like it or not. Like, as a part of that post, I was like, our plastic beat us to the bottom of the ocean. When we rediscovered or made it back down to the Mariana Trench at the end of 2020, what the explorers found was plastic. It's animals and plastic. There's microplastics that blow around, that are small enough to blow around in our air, and that blows over our oceans. And when that lands there, all of the microorganisms that live there eat that plastic, and the fish in turn eat those plastic laden organisms now. And we're to the point where by the time that goes full cycle, we're eating some plastic as a part of having fish, or as a part of eating other things that eat fish. So we are effectively becoming a little bit of our own waste products. Sorry, did I put that book away? Thanks for falling over. That's what I was looking at over there the entire time. And we also, people are probably more familiar with talking about like climate change from a warming global temperature perspective, which does have real impact too. Our emissions make the ability for this entire planet to sequester carbon more difficult. It throws the previously existing equilibrium out of balance. Like, we think that like forests do a lot of our carbon sequestration for us, and that's true. They do a lot of it, but they don't do most of it. At least not anymore. The oceans do that. And as more carbon gets put into the atmosphere, the things that would take that carbon out of the atmosphere end up becoming sort of toxic to it. They get oversaturated with how much carbon they're trying to pull from the atmosphere, which leads to quite a few problems. And we also impact just general systems too. Like, the global rising temperature impacts our ice shelves here. So having ice melt doesn't seem like a big deal, but when all of our ice starts melting, that leads to global sea level rise, which can be pretty catastrophic for places that are living on the coastlines of places that are living on the coastlines of oceans. We can say that. What was the other thing that I pointed out? Yeah, just how those. This one's kind of a harder one to describe, but we have systems in place that move warm water basically to other places of the world. The Gulf Stream system, which is also impacted by just our pushing more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. It has a lot of how we treat this planet has a lot of long-reaching effects. I'm actually just going to move all this stuff over. I keep looking at it. And that just kind of ties back into, there isn't anything we haven't touched here. Like, places that we don't go to, that are the most remote places around. Like, humans hadn't been to the Mariana Trench since the 1960s, 1970s. And even then, we didn't make it as far as we went down this time. And we made it to that floor, in that Hadal zone. And we found our own byproducts there before we even got there. These are the most harsh places on the planet. And our influence reached them before we could reach them ourselves. So when we think that a natural world is one that isn't touched by humans, one that has no evidence of people being there, that's not the case anymore. That hasn't been the case for a while now, frankly. And as soon as you realize that, even if humans haven't touched something like physically, if we haven't added some human structure, some physical change to an ecosystem, as soon as you move the needle into a human has interacted with it or has caused some harm to it, then it is not the natural world and not worth protecting. Then that's a bit of a problem. And I know that's a bit of a stretch coming from we only want pictures of like the natural world. No human interaction there. But and like I think that's okay from like a hobbyist photographer group. But as soon as everybody starts thinking that the natural world is one not touched by humans, and the more that we see as stuff that's actually impacted by us, as soon as we see just how much of the world that covers, and that's our gauge of what's natural, what's beautiful, and worth protecting, then we have a problem. We have a really big problem. So that was kind of the concept there, is that we don't need, well, we do need, we need people to care about things like our tundras and Arctic and Antarctic ice shelves. We need people worried about our oceans and our deepest ocean areas. We need people worried about our rainforests. We need people worried about just how our deserts are acting. But we also need people to care about the environment that's right around us. It may not be what we consider pristine, untouched by people, but it's the world we have now. I choked a little bit there. It's the world we have now. I think one of the quotes that I used there is, the nature that learns to deal with us before we learn to care is the nature that will be waiting for us when we start to care. And we're at a point where if we don't care about if we don't start caring about all of the environment that we have, then only the environment that has grown around us, that has adapted to being around humans, will survive. The rest of it won't, because they've been living with us for a while. The kinds of trees that live on the sides of roads, and the grasses that grow on the sides of railroads and graveyards, the kinds of aquatic life that live on the shoreline. Those are the things that know how to live around people. They've had to adapt ridiculously fast, faster than evolution can allow, to be able to keep up with us. And the things not near us don't know how to do that. So when the things that we do impact them for the first time, it's going to hit hard, really hard. They don't have time to adapt. They didn't get to deal with us changing over the course of years. They're just suddenly impacted by it. And that'll be a problem. So the whole point of that was to just really call to attention how important the nature around us is, that if we start treating that better, the spectrum kind of works. The issue can work in a couple ways. We have a bad influence on nature far from us because we treat the nature close to us as artificial. We manipulated it and changed it into parks and playgrounds and rivers and aqueducts and irrigation systems, but it's still there. That natural foundation is still there. It didn't go away. We just integrated with it. And if we care about that more, then the downstream effects of us caring more means a better sustained nature far from us. And that might be something that might be interesting to dive into a little deeper and see how other people that are smarter than me think about that. But that was one of the things that came out of that whole if it has a road in it, it's not natural. Who's to say? we're a part of this world too. And we built that road out of things that are natural. And yes, we put it through that world in a way that nothing else can. But there's stuff growing there. There's stuff that lives there. And that's just as natural as the things that we can't see, the things not around our roads and our fences and our buildings. But because it can grow there, it's probably pretty darn strong, very adaptable, and very flexible to us. And that's probably worth celebrating too. Anyway, I think we'll probably call it that. This isn't like a super high, very happy thing to be talking about. It's just a very real thing. Yeah, maybe people who come across this will find some value or a new way to convey this thought to others. And if you wanted to read or share what I had written before over the weekend, I'll throw a link to that in the description. But we'll call it that. We'll try and make the next one a little more happier. But hopefully what comes out of this isn't really just like we're doomed. It's just care more about the world around you, the stuff in your immediate vicinity. It's nature too. We are too. Just because we touched it doesn't mean it's not worth protecting. So there's still a little bit of silver lining in there. We have problems, but we've solved most problems that we've come across, or at least found out how to kick the can down the road long enough that smarter people can solve it for us. Hopefully we can keep that trend going. Hopefully we can actually solve them. Yeah, that's it. I'll stop rambling. Hope you're having a wonderful Monday, and we'll catch you in the next one. See ya.